जय, युगधर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय, गौर प्रेमानंदी, सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय, सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय, सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय. All glories, all glories, all glories to Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Shri Radha Nilmadhava ki jai. Shri Radha Giridhari ki jai. Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai. Shri Gauritai ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 87, Prayers of Personified Vedas. And we're going to do text 20, but we also have to finish text 19, the purport from yesterday. So, also, I just want to say a few words again about the chanting of the Sanskrit verse. One key point to make the there's two things. There's meter and there's pitch. Meter and pitch. So like for typically in like if you're chanting Vedic shrutis, which I guess these are the shrutis speaking, but it's in the Bhagavatam, it's in the Smriti. So like, for instance, just Purusha Sukta, let's say, all these hymns of the Vedas. There's a specific pitch and meter that they're set at. There's a specific pitch and meter. You can't just say them anyway. You have to say them exactly according to this way. Now, the Smritis, when you chant Smriti Shastra, it's not the same. You can chant it basically anyway. There's no specific pitch or meter to be sung at. And so there could be many different, of course there's a meter because there's a certain number of syllables in a verse, or in each line of a verse. So this meter is technically different than, say, a different meter that we are used to. Denosmin yata dehe, that's a different meter. But there's no pitch requirement, and what makes a melody is the pattern. If you can make a pattern out of pitch and meter, if the pitch and meter is patternized, then that becomes a melody. So, Well, I can't speak that far. That's too much if I'm going to say that. I don't know anything about music theory, but I know a melody consists of at least pitch and meter. It could consist of something else too, I'm not sure. But and in a pattern. So, in order for that to work, one thing I also wanted to point out is in Sanskrit shlokas, there's something called Sandhi rule. Sandhi. So like we see Sandhi in today's verse several times. Swakrita pure, it's pureshu. If you look at the word for word, it says pureshu. That's locative, plural locative word, pureshu. And amsu, amishu. That's missing an I up there. Oh no, it hasn't, never mind. Amishu, it's also plural and locative. But see how it's written on the board? It's got a V at the end instead. Does everyone see that? It's supposed to be a U, but it's a V. Why is that? Because in order for the meter to be proper, the amount of syllables, it's called sandhi. It's kind of like, what's it called? Contractions in English. But not really. It's just, if an A comes after a U, you put a V. That's the point. Because it flows nicer when you say it. So I just notice a lot of devotees, they say, instead of using the Sandhi rule, they just say, Swakrita Pureshu Amishu Abahir. You're not going to actually chant the shloka properly that way, though. That's not how it's meant to be sung. Now, sometimes if you're quoting a shloka or referring to it, you can quote it like that, of course. But if we're trying to sing it melodically, we have to follow the Sandhi rule, because there's a specific amount of syllables that the author put in there. So let's try it out. I had a melody. Let me think about it. Swakrita pureshva mishva bahir antara samvaranam. Let's go slow. Is that okay? Okay, it's not okay. Let's go slower. Swakrita pureshva mishva bahir antara samvaranam. Tava purusham vadantya kila shakti dritom shakritam. Iti negatim vavitya kavayo nigamavapanam. Tim vavitya kavayo nigamavapanam. Bhavata upasatengrim abhavam bhuvi vishvasitaha. Upasatengrim abhavam bhuvi vishvasitaha. Swakrita pureshva mishva bahir antara samvaranam. Tava purusham vadantya kila shakti dritom shakritam. Purusham vadantya kila shakti dritom shakritam. Eti negatim vivitya kavayo nigamavapanam. Bhavata upasatengrim abhavam bhuvi vishvasitaha. Swakrita pureshva mishva bahir antara samvaranam. Tava purusham vadantya kila shakti dhritom shakritam. Iti negatim vavitya kavayo nigamavapanam. Bhavata upasatengrim abhavam bhuvi vishvasitaha. Would anyone like to try that? Swakrita pureshva mishva bahirantara samvaranam. Does anyone need the melody again? Okay, it goes Swakrita Pureshvamish. Okay, anyone else want to try that? Swakrita Pureshvamishva Bahir Antara Samvaranam. Tava Purusham Vedantya Kila Shakti Dritom Shakritam. Iti Nirgatim Vivitya Kavayo Nigamavapanam. Bhavata Upasatengrim Avavam Bhavivashvasitaha. Huh? I don't know. Anyone else? No, it's different. Anyways, we should be encouraged to chant Sanskrit shlokas because if you memorize Sanskrit, it's really nice. I mean, it's fun. And if you can chant the shlokas, it's fun, it's nice, it's encouraging. So if you put a nice melody to it, it's nicer. It's easier to memorize, easier to chant. That's my theory. Go ahead. Sakrita Pureshvamishva Bahirantara Samvaranam. Tava Purusham Vedantya Kila Shakti Dhritam Shakritam. Iti Nirgatim Bhavitya Kavayo Nigamavapanam. Bhavata Upasatengrim Abhavam Bhuvi Vishvasitaha. Matajis. Sakrita Pureshvamishva Bahirantara Sambaranam. Word for word. Swa. By himself. Krita. created. Pureshu, in the bodies. Amishu, these. Abahihi, not externally. Antara, or internally. Samvaranam, whose factual envelopment. Tava, your. Purusham, living entity. Varanti, the Vedas say. Akila, of all. Shakti, energies. Dritaha, of the possessor. Amsha, as the expansion. Kritam, manifested. Iti, in this manner. Nre, of the living entity. Gatim, the status. Vivichya, ascertaining. Kavayaha, learned sages. Nigama, of the Vedas. Avapanam, the field in which all offerings are sown. Bhavataha, your. Upasate, they worship. Ungrim, the feet. Abhavam, which cause the cessation of material existence. Bhuvi, on the earth. Vishvasitaha, having developed faith. Excuse me. Translation. The individual living entity, while inhabiting the material bodies he has created for himself by his karma, actually remains uncovered by either gross or subtle matter. This is so because, as the Vedas describe, he is part and parcel of you, the possessor of all potencies. Having determined this to be the status of the living entity, learned sages become imbued with faith and worship your lotus feet, to which all Vedic sacrifices in this world are offered, and which are the source of liberation. So we have to read the previous purport, right? We have to finish the previous purport, is that correct? You finished it. So we don't need to finish it. Oh. Okay then, perfect. Okay, let me read the translation again then. The individual living entity, while inhabiting the material bodies he has created for himself by his karma, actually remains uncovered by either gross or subtle matter. This is so because, as the Vedas describe, he is part and parcel of you, the possessor of all potencies. Having determined this to be the status of the living entity, learned sages become imbued with faith and worship your lotus feet, to which all Vedic sacrifices in this world are offered, and which are the source of liberation. Purport. Not only does the Supreme Lord remain totally uncontaminated when he resides within the material bodies of the conditioned souls, but even the infinitesimal jiva souls are never directly touched by the coverings of ignorance and lust they acquire while passing through repeated cycles of birth and death. Thus, the Taittiriya Upanishad 3.10.5 proclaims, Sayaschayam Purushe Yash Chasav Aditye Saikaha. Just a note, so these Upanishads, those have a specific pitch and meter. The way you chant them is not how I just chanted them. I don't know how to chant them. But there's a specific way to chant that. But the Smriti shlokas. You can just chant it however you want. Just a note. What's that? Oh, okay. Okay, the soul of the embodied living being is one with him who stands within the sun. Similarly, the Chandogya Upanishad 6.8.7 teaches, Tat Tvam Asi. You are non-different from that supreme truth. In this prayer, the personified Vedas refer to the finite enjoyer of material bodies, the Jiva soul, as an expansion of the transcendental reservoir of all potencies, the Supreme Lord. The term Ampshakritam, made as his portion, must be properly understood, however, in this context. The Jiva is not created at any time, nor is he the same kind of expansion of the Lord as the omnipotent Vishnu Tattva expansions. The Supreme Soul is the proper object of all worship, and the subordinate Jiva soul is meant to be his worshipper. The Supreme Lord enacts his pastimes by showing himself in innumerable aspects of his personality, whereas the Jiva is forced to change bodies whenever his accumulated karmic reactions so dictate. So I'd like to comment here. Thus far, what have we heard? In the previous verse, we heard about how the Supreme Lord enters into matter, essentially. Eko pyasam rachayatum jagaranda kotim yachchaktir asti jagaranda chayayarantaha andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. It says in the Brahma Samhita that the Lord enters even into the atom, as his in the plenary portion of Paramatma. So the Paramatma is within our hearts. He's also within every single atom. Yeah, Paramatma means super soul. The Supreme Lord expands from the spiritual world and becomes present within the material world in many different ways, but we're specifically referring to this expansion of Paramatma. And in the previous verse, we heard that he does not get contaminated. He does not, he's not affected by that. He's not affected by the material. It says in the previous verse, those who are of, how does it say? Well, it's referring to in the purport, I suppose, because in the verse it's talking about how matter can't really be illuminated except by the Lord's presence. But in the purport it talked about how the Lord does not get affected, even though he's present within all material manifestation as the super soul. He's not contaminated by the three modes of nature. He's completely transcendental. So in today's verse, you just have to listen, because it's a big amount of knowledge. But save the questions, please. No, it's not like that at all. No. Basic concept is nothing works without God. So God manifests himself within every atom in his personal form. But because he's God, he's not material. So he doesn't get affected like we do by material nature. He remains in a transcendental position. Yeah. So hold on, that's the one point. I'm going to make a next point, okay? Okay? Thank you. Now, the point in today's verse thus far is that also the individual living entity does not get contaminated. And so the discussion is going to go on in the purport about this, because one might say, wait a minute, the individual living entity is in Maya, and the Supreme Lord's not in Maya, so how is the living entity not affected? So we've heard that the infinitesimal jiva souls are never directly touched by the covering, the gross and subtle coverings. That's in today's verse. That even though the individual living entity is inhabiting the material bodies that he's created for himself by his karma, he actually remains uncovered by either gross or subtle matter. So one might be wondering, how is that? The Vedas answer, this is so because, as the Vedas describe, he is part and parcel of you, the possessor of all potencies. So in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it says, Aparayami tastvanyam prakritim virime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yaye dam daryate jagat. Krishna says that there's two energies. There's the inferior energy, Bhumir Apo Nalo Vayadam, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then he says that there's a superior energy, which you should know, Arjun, to be the jivas, which are actually enlivening this inferior energy. So, also, we heard from Nayanamrita Prabhu yesterday, quoting 15.7 of Bhagavad Gita, Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke. Krishna is saying that these jivas are my parts and parcels. They're actually my amshas. So in two places, at least, in the Gita, well, actually, we can also go into the 2nd chapter, right? But we're hearing about that the jiva is not affected by matter. And why is that? Because the jiva is spiritual. He's part and parcel of the Lord. In the Ishopanishad, there's a verse, how's it go? Anyways, mantra 16, I can't remember the Sanskrit. But in that verse, it basically says how the jiva is like the particle of the sun is like the sun. So the Supreme Soul is like the sun, but we are like the particles of the sun. But basically, qualitatively one. That's the point. Qualitatively one. Prabhupada put it very simple for us. Qualitatively one. We're spiritual. That's why we're never actually directly affected by. The soul is never affected by the gross or subtle coverings. The soul is transcendental. Asangho yayam purusha. Okay. But as we heard today, or as we started hearing today, there is a gulf of difference between that infinitesimal spirit soul, the jiva, and the supreme soul, the supreme personality of Godhead. So we started hearing about this already today, that he's not the same kind of expansion. He's not Vishnu Tattva. Whereas the Supreme Soul is the object of worship for everyone, the Jiva Soul is actually the worshipper. The infinitesimal Jiva Soul is the worshipper. Whereas the Supreme Lord enacts his pastimes by showing himself in innumerable aspects of his personality, the Jiva is forced to change bodies whenever his accumulated karmic reactions so dictate. Prabhupada writes really beautifully in one purport in the 3rd canto how Mayavadis will say, oh, this is my pastime. These are my pastimes. They refer to their lives, their pitiful lives, as their pastimes. So actually, Prabhupada said, so pastime actually means voluntary acceptance of something that's pleasurable. It doesn't mean forced acceptance of suffering. So they will even go as far to say that the hog life is their pastime, is Brahman's pastime as a hog. So this is Mayavad and not accepted. So this is the difference between the jiva soul and the supreme soul. The supreme soul, Krishna, he voluntarily accepts pastimes for his pleasure. Whereas the jiva soul, conditioned by material nature, is forced to change. He involuntarily has to accept different bodies, which make him suffer, essentially. Okay, so moving on. According to Sri Narada Pancharatra, Yat tatastam tuchid rupam swa samvedyad vinirgatam ranjitam gunaragena sajiva iti katyate. The marginal potency who is spiritual by nature, who emanates from the self-cognizant samvit energy, and who becomes tainted by his attachment to the modes of material nature, is called the jiva. That is a very interesting verse, which I don't know what to say about it. But it's very interesting, I feel. The jiva emanates from the self-cognizant samvit energy. It's interesting. But the jiva is known as tatashta. Tata sta, situated on the shore. Tata, it means the shore. That place where the water on the beach and the dry land. It's tata, that's the shoreline. So sta, situated on that shoreline. Marginal, could go either way. Jiva can go either way. Spiritual energy, serve Krishna, or material energy, serve my material senses. Serve the ahankara, false ego. Although the jiva soul is also an expansion of Lord Krishna, he is distinguished from Krishna's independent Vishnu expansions by his constitutional position on the margin between spirit and matter. As the Mahavaraha Purana explains, we'll skip that Sanskrit for time's sake, quote, the Supreme Lord is known in two ways. In terms of his plenary expansion. Plenary means complete. That's what it means. It just means complete. His plenary expansions and his separated expansions. Between the plenary expansions and their source of expansion, there is never any essential difference in terms of their capabilities, forms, or situations. The separated expansions, on the other hand, possess only minute potency, being endowed only to a small extent with the Lord's powers. So that's a very important citation right there. It really describes what is the difference between the minute living entity, the jiva, me, you, and the Supreme Lord. Between Krishna's expansions in the Vishnu Tattva category, which are called his plenary expansion, it says there's never any essential difference. So Krishna and Balaram, they have the same capabilities, more or less the same forms, same situation, Vishnu Tattva. But his separated expansions are different from him in more ways. Like Balaram's different than Krishna? Yes. We say that all the time. He has different pastimes, his color of the body is different. But there's no essential difference. But between the separated expansion, the jiva, and the Supreme Lord, there is an essential difference. There's also essential similarities, like we've been talking about. Both of them are spiritual, but there's also this essential difference. So this is a piece of the puzzle which perhaps impersonalists do not understand. I think that's safe to say that maybe this knowledge is tucked away in the Vedic literature and needs to be explained by one who actually knows, by an acharya. And so when we hear then we actually get the proper knowledge. The conditioned soul in this world appears as if covered by matter, internally as well as externally. Jai Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai. The conditioned soul in this world appears as if covered by matter, internally as well as externally. Externally, gross matter surrounds him in the forms of his body and environment, while internally, desire and aversion impinge upon his consciousness. This is talking about the gross body and the subtle body. Yeah, so the jiva soul appears to be covered by these two manifestations of material energy. But from the transcendental perspective of realized sages, both kinds of material covering are insubstantial. By logically eliminating all material identities, which are misconceptions based on the soul's gross and subtle coverings, a thoughtful person can determine that the soul is nothing material. Rather, he is a pure spark of divine spirit, a servant of the Supreme Godhead. Understanding this, one should worship the Supreme Lord's lotus feet. Such worship is the fully bloomed flower of the tree of Vedic rituals. Now, this is really important. This is a really important point, because someone can take this knowledge that actually the soul is not covered in one sense. That's what's being stated here. And decide that, okay, then I have no work to do. If I'm good, then let me enjoy my pastimes here. I'm uncovered. It doesn't affect me. Really. They get this theoretical jnana, but then they misapply it. So that's one way one can go with it, if they're not hearing from proper sources, or they don't have proper motives, or proper association. But here we hear the Vedas they're saying actually, what should come as a result of having this knowledge, that you are not a material body, you are not a material mind, you are not your senses, you are not even your intelligence. You have nothing to do with it, actually. The soul is transcendental, is not touched. Asango hyayam purushaha. It's another Vedic aphorism saying that the living entity has nothing, no sangha. He has no association with matter. Completely transcendental. But as we heard, the jiva is tatashta. So we have the tendency to enter into the dreamlike state that we are matter. Whereas the Lord never has that propensity, never has that tendency. He's never under illusion. Because actually, what is Mahamaya? It's the Supreme Lord's energy. Daivim prakritim. Right? Daivi yesha gunamayi. Mamamaya. Krishna says, this is my divine energy, which is conditioning everyone and making them think that they're matter. So, although the soul, which is spiritual, part and parcel of Krishna, cannot be covered by matter, by Krishna's divine energy, that soul can think that he's covered by matter because of his illicit desires to try to be God. So that's the difference, is when we say, I am not conditioned by matter, we're saying that in a certain context. It means the soul's spiritual by nature, and therefore, the Vedas are saying, one should worship the Lord. That's the conclusion the Vedas have come to. You realize that you're not material, therefore worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Become a devotee of Krishna. That's their conclusion. He says in the verse today, having determined this to be the status of the living entity. So as soon as we actually, with faith and conviction, determine that I am not a material body or mind, I am a spiritual spark of Krishna, I'm Krishna's part and parcel, servant. Learned sages become imbued with faith and worship your lotus feet. So that's the point, is that knowledge should lead to bhakti. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyante vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sadurlabhaha. After many, many births, one who is actually in knowledge surrenders to Krishna. Because they realize everything material is insubstantial. It has nothing to do with me. I'm already situated apart from it. It's like waking up from a dream. It's the jiva sees that, yes, we were experiencing the dream, whereas the person who's awake never experiences the dream. He knows it's a dream, but we didn't know. So when we get woken up, we realize, I was never dreaming. I was never actually going through that experience. It was just a dream. So when someone actually is self-realized, they realize, this material coverings is completely insubstantial. So again, a group of pseudo-spiritualists will say, therefore, we enjoy this dream to our utmost. It's just a dream, so just enjoy it. Has anyone heard that? This is the Mayavad conception, that taking the birth of the pig is a pastime. So the Vaishnavacharyas are adamantly against that conclusion, that because the spirit soul is not affected by matter, is always transcendental, it doesn't mean that he's the same as God and has pastimes like this. So seeing the sameness and seeing the difference, one has to understand these things in context from hearing from authorities. So, finishing the purport now, one's realization of the splendor of the Lord's lotus feet, gradually nourished by the offering of Vedic sacrifices, automatically bears the fruits of liberation from material existence in irrevocable faith in the Lord's mercy. One can accomplish all this while still living in the material world. As Lord Krishna states in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad, Uttara 47, quote, one who worships me in my deity form while living in the district of Mathura, or indeed anywhere in Jambudweep, becomes most dear to me in this world. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, Twad amshasya mamem shana, twanmaya krita bandhanam, Twad angri sevam adishya, prananda nivartaya. My Lord, please free me, your partial expansion, from the bondage created by your Maya. Please do this, O abode of supreme bliss, by directing me to the service of your feet. That's beautiful. That's the beautiful conclusion of the purport. So in bhakti, we don't make so much of we don't make it our main meal to simply do this neti, discriminate between matter and spirit. I mean, that's very important knowledge that Prabhupada pretty much emphasized every single class, that you're not the body. And until you get that, then, the abhideya, the practice of devotional service won't necessarily be, full on. But in devotional service, in bhakti yoga, we don't rely on the perfection of the jnana process. Bahunam janmana. We don't rely on many, many births of cultivating this jnana and doing tapa, austerities. Although that's a path, But the whole point is that the goal of that path is to worship Krishna. So here we are, worshiping Krishna, chanting his names, serving his deity form, serving his devotees. We've already reached the perfection. As devotees, we've bypassed the other processes. So it takes an honest evaluation. Am I actually serving Krishna? Because that point is only applicable as if we're actually performing devotional service. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma jnanavirtam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktir uttama. Rupa Goswami defines pure devotional service as that which is performed for Krishna, favorably, without any ulterior motives, without any tinge of jnana or karma. So to the extent which we are actually performing this pure devotional service, to that extent, knowledge and detachment is automatically revealed to us. Janayat yashu vairagyam jnanam cha yadahaitukam. Causeless knowledge and detachment are bestowed upon one who is practicing bhakti. So, now with that said, in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami, there's a chapter called the Final Instruction to Maharaj Parikshit. Shukadeva Goswami's final instructions. And what is that final instruction that he says? He says, this is after the whole Bhagavatam, the whole 10th canto, the 11th canto, everything, the whole Bhagavatam, right at the end. The last thing Shukadeva Goswami says to Maharaj Parikshit is that you're not your body. He says, my final instruction is, give up this animalistic concept that you're about to die. It's beautiful, very beautifully put. Give up the animal conception that you're going to die. The soul's transcendental. So, an intelligent person, a thoughtful person who's sincere will pay more attention to the spiritual reality rather than the temporary names and forms in this world, and develop association and love on the spiritual platform. Find the happiness within. Find the happiness in Krishna. That's what the Vedas are saying here, is that, Sridhar Swami summarizes it at the end of every purport here. That was the essential point. We're a part and parcel of Krishna. I'm transcendental. My birthright is to be in the kingdom of God, serving Krishna in eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And because I'm Tatashta, I'm being controlled by Krishna's divine energy. Therefore, the prayer is, please free me, your partial expansion from the bondage created by your Maya. Please do this, O abode of supreme bliss, by directing me to the service of your feet. Any reflections or comments, questions? Prana to Karuna Prabhu.
Thank you very much for a nice class. You were speaking about the difference between the plenary expansions and the separated expansions, and then I started kind of formulating a question that you answered. Because I was thinking, because we know that Krishna, you have like Krishna, but then you have like the Vishnu Tattva, which have, correct me if I'm wrong, 94% of the qualities of Krishna, and then you have the plenary expansions, and I was thinking, you explained that plenary means complete, and I was trying to, I was kind of, but then you answered that the plenary expansions and the separated expansions have an essential difference, and I wanted to make sure I understood exactly what the essential difference was. Is it that the separated expansions are qualitatively one with the Lord but quantitatively different, but that the plenary expansion is actually quantitatively That's the essential difference?
That is correct, yeah. That is the correct understanding. Yeah, that's the correct understanding.
Thank you.
Anything else? Sarvabhauma Prabhu.
Some kind of New Age people, they say, I chose this birth. In one sense it's true, in one sense it's not. Would you comment on that? It just seems like a silly statement, but they say, I don't know what they mean, but somehow they say this sometimes. Have you ever heard anybody say that?
Yeah, definitely. We just met someone on the campus of HCC who comes up to our table every time we're there and basically condescends us, but essentially he just says, thanks for coming again. How does he say it, guys? I mean, he basically told us that he's God and he's an incarnation and that we are his servants, helping him spread his whatever. So he comes and thanks us and, demands that we look him in the eyes. And so people are really illusioned and, Oh yeah. He said he's going to come to the temple. We invited him so that we can come, that we can finally see him. So this is deeply illusioned, and we should have compassion on these people. Depending on their openness for knowledge, we can give them a book, or give them prasadam, or get them to engage in chanting Krishna's names. They just went too far with it. They went too far with the thing. And today's verse does say that we did choose this birth. The individual living entity, while inhabiting the material bodies he has created for himself by his karma. So how do we create it? Actually the modes of nature are doing the work. They are the ones who, the material nature is actually the one that's building the body. We don't do anything. And Krishna's aloof, being a Prakritir Ashtada, separated energy. Krishna doesn't come and get his hands messy. And the living entity desires, Krishna sanctions, and then the material nature gets the work. And so in that way, we have chosen this body, we've chosen this by dint of our karma. Now, unfortunately, we didn't do it like, it was done in ignorance. When there's ignorance, then we don't know what we're going to get. We don't know. So even if you were thinking, I really want to be a demigod, but your whole habits last life were abominable, and you get the birth of an animal. So, first deserve, then desire, is said. You had something?
I was just feeling a lot of compassion for that kid at Lone Star, because it sounds like he has some kind of like bipolar schizophrenia, and when they're actually in a lot of suffering, because I have family members that have that. When they go into these manias, they get very grandiose feelings and experiences about themselves, and they're actually deeply, deeply isolated people. And so I'm very sensitive to that, and just, most people wouldn't say things like that unless they had some kind of mental condition. So let's be very, sensitive and kind to them, and know that they're probably just really deeply inside isolated. And, it's important that, I know it's funny here, but I just,
No, I think you're right. It's a mental condition. I think it's a mental, perhaps mental illness, definitely.
Particularly the different modes of karma. Are there like different? Since we are on one path, yet you said there like maybe different modes of work, or the different modalities. Are there different forms of karmic actions that
Yeah,
we can
there's three.
utilize
Okay. Your question is basically about the three modes of nature.
Yeah.
So just like there's three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, there's three primary modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And so everything is having these modes. These modes make up the material world. So what we eat, when we eat meat, we are increasing our mode of ignorance. We're perpetuating our ignorance. Ignorance is a state of suffering.
like the karma nature?
When we eat more vegetarian foods offered to Krishna, that's actually transcendental. It's beyond the mode. So our goal is actually not to necessarily just be in the mode of goodness, but actually it's to transcend all three modes of material nature and go to the what's called Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness, the transcendental platform.
Would you mind saying that again?
Huh?
Would you mind saying that again?
Yeah. So the goal is actually not to just get ourselves into an elevated material situation, try to get predominantly the material mode of goodness. That's peacefulness, yoga, and, having a nice, happy, peaceful life. That's not our goal, actually. Our goal is to get out of this material modes of nature, and the only way to do that is to approach Krishna, is to approach the Supreme Soul who's transcendental. So we are transcendental, Krishna's transcendental, but in order for us to actually, we are dependent, whereas he's independent. So when we actually turn towards him, then we also can be, how do I say, we can also be of that nature, transcendental to the modes of nature.
The transcendental reality of nature. So
We want to be transcendental to nature, material nature.
with nature.
Yeah, so that's cool. Is that okay? Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.